get him right on the show then. Michael Shure knows more about politics than I've ever forgotten. I said it wrong, but let's bring him in. He's a political analyst. He's a really smart individual, and I always love the conversation. Michael Shure, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Thank you for
Can I
being
go lie?
here.
I don't have COVID, but can I just go lie down?
No, you cannot lie down. No. At least 20 minutes we're going to need you, and then maybe we'll give you a nap. We'll
Fair
give you a
enough.
little nap. Yeah. Did you hear this? And I have sound to play for you. Hopefully, Albert can help me out with this. If we could start it at 25. But this whole being called weird thing that
Yeah.
the Democrats are doing to Republicans seems to be affecting Trump a lot. And he's getting a little upset about it. And he was on a podcast yesterday and they bring up this, the whole being called weird, and he gets a little bit squirrely about it all. Do we have the sound, Albert?
I'm locked out from that article, so
Oh,
I can't.
okay.
No sound.
So he starts talking about how, I'm not weird. They're weird. I'm not weird. JD Vance isn't weird. They're weird. Mark seems to think that there's a lot of other more prudent arguments to be made as to, why the Republicans shouldn't be voted back in, why Trump shouldn't be voted back in, and that this weird thing is a weird argument in and of itself. But I think if it's getting under his skin and it's working, I kind of like it. What are your
Well,
thoughts?
yeah. I mean, I think that's what happens with these things is, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, said it, and people glommed onto it, and then it started getting written about and talked about. And is it a pejorative or is it not? And is it, is it accurate or is it not? And so I think I know what Mark's saying, but I don't think it really matters because people aren't talking about it. And if Trump is talking about it, then maybe it accidentally hit home in a way that people think it's okay for it to hit home. It's not going to be. I don't think it's something that Democrats are dwelling on. Today, Josh Shapiro used the word, and just because the word's been so prevalent, my ears perked up because I thought, oh, they're going with weird again. But I think it's just because we say the word weird once in a while, and that's how Shapiro used it today.
Yeah, it's an interesting attack. Today, though, we find out the July totals for the fundraising. And we find out that Kamala Harris raised $310 million in July compared to, I think it's $138.7 million for Trump in July.
Yeah.
Most of the money from Harris's campaign contributions coming from first-time donors, the biggest grassroots fundraising effort in presidential campaign history is what they're calling it. What's the significance?
Well, I mean, the significance is basically that it is the exclamation point on the enthusiasm gap being closed, as we've predicted here on the Mark Thompson Show now for months, at least on Fridays at noon, is that as soon as we had a new candidate that wasn't President Biden, that was the difference. The difference was the enthusiasm gap. Yeah, most Democrats would have voted for the president, but there wouldn't have been that enthusiasm. There wouldn't have been the constituencies that sort of get excited around a candidate that you're already seeing with Vice President Harris when she goes and fills halls and she fills arenas and people are coming out because now you have a 45,000 person call-in Zoom with the vice president with black women, and it creates energy. Would most of those black women have voted for President Biden? Probably, but we don't know. Now there is something that is actually, there's an anchor to what they want to do, and it's happening everywhere. And of course, it happens with the money as well.
You mentioned black voters, and I want to bring it up because I want to get your thoughts on what happened with the National Association of Black Journalists and Trump's kind of attacking, I'll use the word weird, meltdown that he had on stage there. How damaging is that for his campaign?
There's not one Trump voter who he lost by doing that. But his job is not just to hang on to Trump voters. His job is to sort of win over independents or win over disenchanted Democrats who maybe people who voted for Biden aren't sure about Harris. Maybe people who voted for Trump, then Biden, and could go back, even though there was something they didn't like about Trump. His job is to woo those people. He's not doing a good job of wooing right now, and that was bizarre. And I think the takeaway from that is not just like his disconnect and how ridiculous it was for him to have accepted that invitation in a way, but the way he says things like black jobs, or the way he qualified Vice President Harris as, she was Indian until she was black. I mean, she was born as a black woman, and if he saw her, sitting in a restaurant and he had to describe her to someone else, he would say the black woman who was sitting at the table next to me. So that was just so disconnected from the way we talk about race in this country now, and that's what I mean. I mean, his crowd might talk about it that way. He needs to build his crowd, and that's not helping.
No, that was not helpful at all. But meanwhile, on the Harris team front, she's got to pick a running mate, and she's supposed to do it by Monday, Tuesday at the very latest, because Tuesday she and this running mate are off on a tour of swing states. So she's, I guess, vetting 6 people. What's it look like as far as what you're seeing?
At the very beginning, the sources I had said that they were looking pretty closely at Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. We haven't heard about him. Roy Cooper was another one that I heard talk of, but he pulled himself out of the running in kind of Biden-esque way to stay in North Carolina, because the lieutenant governor there, who is a Republican, is also the Republican candidate there. And so I think that he wanted to make sure that person, because of some arcane laws they have in North Carolina, didn't do executive orders while he was out campaigning for the vice presidency. So that helped the campaign, the Harris campaign, because that was one less person to look at. And then there's Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. And, people are talking about him now with a seriousness that I hadn't heard before. I don't read into the fact that it's being kicked off in Philadelphia. I think that when you're running as sort of a pro-democracy campaign, and fighting against the terrors to democracy, starting in Philadelphia would be where anyone would start. If you were running someone from Alaska and Hawaii, you might want to start in Philadelphia, Independence Hall, the cradle of our republic. So I think that doesn't move it for me. But the fact that Josh Shapiro brings energy, I'm not a big I don't care much about who the vice presidential running mate is, as long as they don't hurt and as long as you're not mired in negatives throughout. Even J.D. Vance, Donald Trump is not going to win or lose because of J.D. Vance, and I don't think Harris will win or lose unless something happens with as far what we know changes, I guess, is with our thoughts right now. Something were to change there, then maybe it affects it. Shapiro, fine. Mark Kelly, fine. The senator from Arizona.
Well, she's, from what I understand, has to pick someone from a swing state, right? I mean, I guess she doesn't have to, but that's
she doesn't have to, yeah. That's because people overthink the vice presidency, right? I think Harris wins Pennsylvania without Shapiro, and I think that she may win Arizona, but it won't be because of Mark Kelly. That's just me. Other people would argue against that, but I don't think people vote for the vice president.
How important is it, though, to make a wise choice as far as what that running mate would bring to the team, as far as where they're from, or how many electoral votes are in that state? How strategic does she have to be about the decision?
I mean, I think the intangibles are more important. Al Gore, when he was picked by Bill Clinton, was from Tennessee, and he was a little like Bill Clinton. That's why he picked him, to sort of have this sort of new. It was Reagan and Bush. It was 2 older guys before that, and then it was Bush and Quayle, and Bush was still a holdover from the old Republicans. Bill Clinton and Al Gore were this new, young, Southern energy, but Democrats, and it was an intangible. It wasn't about winning Tennessee, and it wasn't about any other demographic. It was just about what the ticket portrays. So I think if Harris were to pick, let's say, Josh Shapiro, yes, would it help in Pennsylvania? Sure, it wouldn't hurt. Certainly, he's a governor who was elected overwhelmingly, who has a very big favorability number. But at the same time, I think what he would bring is this kind of sharpness, this energy that they want to see from our candidates now, that Democrats want to say, this is who we want to see, because we are talking about running against the oldest person who's ever run for president before. So that's the contrast you do. So I don't think the strategy of where they're from, who their electoral votes are, I think you want to, A, not make a mistake, and B, have somebody who gives you an intangible that your campaign would profit from.
Speaking of not making a mistake, Trump, again, is saying that there's not a real reason for him to debate Kamala Harris. That while he wants to debate his rival, his comments were, people know where I stand on the issues, and they know where Kamala Harris stands on the issues. And so there's really not a reason to do this. Meanwhile, you've got Kamala Harris at her rallies saying, he seems to be scared of me and has a lot to say about me. And why doesn't he come and say it to my face, type of thing?
Yeah.
Does it look bad for Trump not to debate Kamala Harris? Does he have to do it?
He doesn't have to do it. There were times when we didn't have debates in this country. From 1960 to 1976, there weren't presidential debates, and we still elected, regularly elected presidents in that time period. I think that again, this goes back to when we were talking about the NABJ stuff with Trump. Is that I think that he's somebody who needs to win more voters in more places. And by running from your opponent, that doesn't help. So strategically, I think that you are foolish not to go to a debate when your opponent says, I'll debate you anytime, anywhere, because it means that you're hiding something, or you're afraid of this person. Donald Trump probably tired of prosecutors, which is what Kamala Harris spent a good portion of her life being. So I just think that that it doesn't help.
Have you seen these new ads that are, I'm not sure who's behind them, but they're former Trump voters, Trumpers, that have now turned against him. And there's a series of ads they're making calling him a criminal. I wonder if those are going to be effective, or if you're still one of these people that if you're a Trumper, you're just going to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, these ads are not to try and get the diehards away from Donald Trump. They're not going anywhere, folks. They're staying with him. He's got a solid base. There are people that have glommed onto him from the very beginning and aren't letting go. It's getting the casual Trump voter. It's getting the, I don't know if I can vote for the Democrats again voter. It's the, man, the price of bread is really high. I don't like Donald Trump, but I don't want to pay this much for a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs. It's that voter who these ads are geared towards. So I guess I think when you have regular people talking about the negative stuff and people who had voted for Trump, it creates a safety net, basically, for these people to come and say, okay, yeah, the eggs and the bread are high, but this guy is a criminal. I just can't do that, right? So I think it's a thin swath of voters that it goes to, but that's the way we advertise now. It's these targeted ads that are mostly streaming. That people see, and it changes, it makes it a safe thing for people to not vote for Donald Trump.
I don't know when the last time you were at a Trump event, because I know that you are sent there quite often in your other job.
My last one was I was at the convention, which was as Trump an event as there is, I guess.
Okay. So I wonder if between then and now, where we have Kamala Harris, who today apparently just locked up the nomination, I wonder if we have enough, if things have changed at Trump rallies where people are feeling the lack of momentum and the shift in a campaign.
Yeah, I think that, I've spoken to Republicans since then. I haven't spoken to the diehards, the Trump rally goers, but I've spoken to Republicans who say, yes, they feel the sea change. And I've spoken to Democrats who feel it too, people who are honest with me from the beginning about President Biden's chances, some who are more optimistic than others. But but it's impossible not to feel this change, and it's impossible not to feel it in states that matter. And I know for a fact that they're trying to change their map on the Republican side, how they're campaigning, the emphasis on Georgia, an emphasis on states that may not have been where they were going to do a lot of spending aside from Georgia, but they have to win some of the states that went away from them last time with more desperation, because I think they look at Michigan as not as fertile as they had hoped it would be, and perhaps even Pennsylvania. So, and North Carolina has even polled differently since Harris was the de facto nominee. So there's definitely a change in the way they're approaching this race. And I think they weren't happy with what the president did the other day at the NABJ. I think I know it has mattered to Republicans who I've spoken to.
Lastly, I'll ask you this question that Mark wanted to ask you earlier. He had mentioned that he was going to bring it up with you. And it is the J.D. Vance connection to the Project 2025 leader. Apparently, he wrote the foreword in this man's book. Meanwhile, the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign, I should say, has been trying to distance itself from Project 2025. And here's J.D. Vance, who's written the foreword in the book. And there's some pretty outrageous stuff in the book. So I wonder, is this just another instance where J.D. Vance becomes an anchor around the campaign, the Trump campaign?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Again, I'm gonna hold fast to the fact that J.D. Vance is gonna have nothing to do with who wins the presidency this year.
Right.
And so, and Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025. Paul Dance, who was the executive director of Project 2025, was with the Heritage Foundation, stepped away from that. I don't think people are not walking around their neighborhoods and rural and urban parts of this country talking about Project 2025. It's happening at a level that's much higher than the voters that are going to, be embroiled in this campaign are. And so, yeah, maybe Democrats are put off by it, but they also see something that they want to jump on. When the candidate has said that he doesn't even know what it is, we know that's not true. But there really is. There's never been an official embrace from Trump of 2025, of Project 2025, even though it was written up by former Trumpers and Trump administration people, and likely many of them would be in a future Trump administration. It's hard to articulate what it is.
Yeah. Michael Shure, I know you have to go, so thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate the conversation always. Have a great rest of your weekend.
All right, you two guys.
Bye-bye.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.